Good morning and welcome to the Light on Suitability podcast with your host, Elizabeth Comeau, and attorney Michele Garfinkel, and our special guest, Joseph Haytas. Joseph Haytas is also an attorney who represents eligible parolees at their suitability hearing, and he's also the author of 36 Strategies of Suitability, an inmate's guide to navigating the parole suitability process in California. This book is in second edition print, available on Amazon and other approved vendors by the CDCR. And we wanted to talk to Joe about his book and a variety of issues about it, and anything else he wanted to bring up, quite frankly. And I wanted to ask first Joe about his experience when he got started doing parole hearings, then why he wrote the book.
Okay. First of all, Elizabeth, Michele, thank you for having me on. It's a privilege to be on your show, and I know it's picking up listeners all the time. At any rate, I would like to say, you want to know about my background and then about how I got to do the book.
Yeah, I think if I recall, because I've known you a long time, quite a while, I think almost a decade. I think I know you the
Yeah.
same number of years as Michele, but I think you've been doing this since 2009. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. I may
And
have
how
observed
did you
like in
get
2000.
started?
I was doing the mentally disordered offender hearings, and I wasn't getting much work, and I called into somebody in Sacramento, and I said, "Hey, when do you think I'm gonna, get assigned again?" And so they go, "Oh, by the way, we have these parole suitability hearings. If you're interested in doing that as well, you might get more work." So I was interested, and I went to CIW and I observed a couple hearings, and then I started. I started slow, and then there wasn't much stuff back then, like as far as materials to get up to speed. So I kind of had to learn as you go, on the job training. But I did that, and then eventually started getting more work, and I really enjoyed it, especially when back then in the day when excuse me, when there weren't very many grants, and
Mm-hmm.
so it was like really satisfying if like one month you got one grant, and I guess I don't know. I'm not saying I was addicted to that feeling, but it was like reaching nirvana when you get a grant. So, and I really liked that, so I wanted more and more. And then how did I guess I'll segue into the book. Uh, I was out, I think, at RJ Donovan. Hearings were all over the place. Back then, you weren't like, anyways, I was at RJ Donovan talking to inmates, and none of them were really, ready. Some of them were far off. And I just, something spoke to me and said, hey, you know what? I should write a book for all the inmates, something to help them because I didn't see one. So I guess that's when I decided to write the book. But I had a lot of false starts, started and then stopped, but then it finally got traction in around 2017, 2018, and I just persevered through and got it written, and then I had to do a lot of editing because it was all over the place, and I wanted to give it some
Mm-hmm.
structure.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I attempted to do, and actually when I wrote it, I tried to speak to the inmates like I was writing a letter to an inmate. I was trying to speak to them directly because they're the audience for this.
I noticed that about your book too, Joe. It was very readability. The level of reading isn't too, like a sixth grader could read it. I'm not
Mhm.
saying that our clients all read at a sixth grade level, but also it's still readable for somebody who could read at a greater than 12th grade level. It's just nice, plain, simple language, not overly complicated. But when do you, I think Michele and I were curious, when do you find the time to put this effort in? And how did you start it? Did you start it like with an outline of things that kept coming up at your meetings with these clients where there are areas where they're not prepared? What was the process involved in all of that and the time?
Sure. Well, back then, well, back then it wasn't that long ago. we were getting assignments of, one institution a month and only one meeting. I had more time then, even though I was still doing some civil work. But also, too, the flip side of that was I just felt compelled to write it, so I had to find the time. And so, you know, actually, when the book really took off was, I believe, the end of 2018 through 2019, like from Thanksgiving to about the end of February, I was like writing almost every day because I said, if I don't, I'm never going to get this done. Just doing a few hours a week versus like 4 hours a day over a course of like 3 or 4 months. And then it took shape. Well, you asked me how did I start doing it?
Yeah, like where do you start on something like that? It's a pretty big project. I mean, it's a very well written book.
Oh,
And
thank you.
my copy is the first edition. You know, it's almost 300 pages. So
Mhm.
that's huge. Where do you start with something like that? Like an outline of areas where you're consistently seeing issues?
Yeah, that's one side of it. I didn't have I had an outline at first, but I ended up, veering off the outline. And actually, how I started, I got like one chapter done that really I thought was adequate to present. And believe it or not, that was like I was at Avenal State Prison and Chaplain Ornelas. Uh, they asked me if I would like, come and speak to a group, so I did. And I think I was like overly prepared, because I didn't know what to expect. So, and I had written a chapter like on remorse and writing the remorse letter. So I had everything down, and that like was the first chapter I'd actually completed. And obviously, it's not the first chapter of the book, so I kind of skipped around and I tried to give it some kind of structure, like presentation, preparation for a hearing, during a hearing. Don't do anything your mom wouldn't have you do, or would disagree with, sit up straight, that kind of thing. And then during the hearing and after the hearing, So that's kind of the structure I try to give it, like from
I
beginning
really
to
like,
end.
yeah, I really like the book. And the one thing I really love the first chapter, it always, it's just, that's it. That's kind of it in a nutshell. Think free. And I really thought that was brilliant to put that in. And I think I'll turn it over to Michele and then I'll probably ask questions after or follow up, or we can just take the conversation where we want to go.
Okay, you'll
Sounds
follow up. Maybe you'll have more questions from the risk assessment. I don't know.
Yeah,
you
exactly, exactly.
Sure.
you're in the hot spot, Joe. We're going to question you. I have to say, I really like the book, and I appreciate how you write it as you would speak to them because the way I envision the book is kind of like my introductory letter, but 100 times longer. And I thought it was great. And with the first thing, like Elizabeth said, with the Think Free chapter, I tell all of my clients start behaving on the inside like you will on the outside. So, did you talk to inmates when you wrote the book? Did you interview anybody, or was this all from your experiences?
I have to say it was mostly from my experiences. I mean, but I did talk to inmates, but not for purposes of the book, for purposes of, their representation. But you know what? I got to say, I learned from the inmates every time I talked to them, just as I learned from all the attorneys on our Monday meetings. And the commissioners at the hearings. I just try to, take in whatever I can. Everybody has a point of view, and I try to learn from everybody, even the inmates. I mean,
I
number
really,
one from the inmates.
I thought it was great because I could really just see speaking some of this to my clients, and I thought it was really a great thing how you did the appendixes with the resources for them. And
Mhm.
so I think that's all wonderful. I don't really know if I have more questions. I'm more just interested in your process and how you did it because I'm so impressed by it. I think it's
Oh,
just so well written and it's really, like I said, it's just written out so easily that even someone that potentially doesn't have a GED or a high school diploma can get it. Was that your intention? I'm just more fascinated by your process, to be honest. I think the book is great, and I like the strategies because even how you have honesty in there, I think there's 2 chapters on honesty, and it's the most important thing, being credible and being honest. So I'm just kind of more curious about your process because I think it's great.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, what you just talked about. As far as the
Sorry.
thing on being honest, the one about being brutally honest is probably one of the shortest chapters in the book, but that's the one I get some of the most good comments from the inmates on, saying, well, not all inmates, but some actually who get granted parole, they tell me, Joe, I followed, or no, they say, Mr. Haytas. I said, just call me Joe, please. Uh, don't dispense with the formalities. I
I'm
tell
like that
them
too.
and they tell me, like, I was brutally honest, and I got granted parole, because I tried really hard to be brutally honest about everything, and I did, and we were granted parole. So I'm glad they're reading it, and glad they're listening to it. Well, not listening. Sorry, I'm so excited being on this show here. Um, the other thing you were asking about, what the I lost my train of thought here. If you
I
could,
was talking about like the resources and really just your process because the way you put it together, I mean, I guess it's just from your experience in the hearings, but I just appreciated how well written it was and how you made it easy for any educational level. And was that your intention?
it was. I wanted to make it in plain and simple language. Us attorneys, we like to use words sometimes longer than an 18-wheeler. So I wanted, I wanted to make it very understandable with lots of clarity, and it needs to be clarity. We go into our hearings, and sometimes inmates, they go off on tangents, or when we talk to them, we ask them a simple yes or no question, and then they start telling us about their life and what they've done for the last 20 years. So I try to make it very simple, like steps 1, 2, 3, like logical. So it could be understanding. We don't need to impress them. We are who we are.
I think that's great because I think a lot of times our clients come into the hearing and they're intimidated or they think they have to speak a certain way. Like I tell my clients, just don't curse, be respectful, talk to them like they're already your neighbor, just like you would meeting a new neighbor on the outside. They're not your friend yet, but you want to get to know them because when they
Mhm.
come in and start speaking the group speak, as we all call it doesn't go well, especially when you don't even understand the words that you're using fully. So I thought it was great the way you wrote it because I think it would encourage our clients to also speak just how they normally speak, which goes a long way in the hearing. As long as you're respectful, no one expects you to speak like you have a college education. So I thought that was great.
Yeah, exactly. I tell them too, just be yourself, because that's them being honest, being sincere, and that comes from the heart. So be yourself. Don't try to be somebody you're not, because it just puts a veil of you lose credibility, first of all, I believe, if you try to be somebody that you're not.
Right? The
Definitely.
impression management is big. And I tell my clients all the time, I tell them right before we get started, I'm really nervous. Okay, what are you
Mhm.
nervous about? Well, talking to them, okay, well, what's making you nervous? I really want to get credit parole. I go, okay, stop. Do not try to get paroled today.
Mhm.
That effort was before. Today, I want you to just be yourself and talk normal and talk to them like you're just having a conversation with me, your buddies on the yard, whatever. Talk about like you would about football. Just talk normal, because the minute you start trying to get the answer right, what if I get the answer wrong? No, you're going to get this. Then you're going to get dinged with this impression management thing. And that goes a long way with credibility, because the commissioners are even okay with an I don't know, as long as you've got, I don't know the exact language of step 4. Well, have you worked the steps? Yes, I've done all these different things and they're real life examples, but it's not the memorized step. You're not getting denied parole because of that. And so just that, really important not to do that impression management. You get hit with a credibility issue on that too. You're
Mhm.
trying to memorize your way out of here again. we talk about this on the show all the time. Memorizing your way out doesn't work. You've got to internalize it. And internalizing simply just means you know this. This is who you are. You speak about it normally. And Sean and Daryl, who are on the show all the time, that's how they talk. And they're still talking about it today. All the stuff they talked about with the panel. I love this stuff. I love the quotes at the beginning of each chapter as well. Joe, very somewhat motivational, sometimes kind of funny, but all of them very appropriate for the chapter that you're about to get into. The other thing is very positive ratings on Amazon. You've got at least, you've almost got 100 reviews. You've got like a 4.7 out of 5 stars on the book itself. Everybody's very positive about that. Very well received book. I was wondering if this book could be converted somehow to a workbook. I'm not sure if it could or if it couldn't. I don't know if you could work through this book and create a workbook out of it, but something I thought of.
No, that's
In
a
all
great
your free
suggestion.
time.
Yeah, in our free time, right. But no, seriously, that's I heard that from one other person as well, and I think that's a good idea because what just reading the plain words obviously don't do it. You have to practice what's in the book. A couple, uh, this one guy at Chino, he's got a group and they use the book, and I'm always telling him, well, hey, invite me down. I'd be happy to talk to you guys, but that hasn't happened yet.
Well,
But
I was
maybe
going
it
to
will.
say, even like if we have listeners or family members, if they get the book, for example, like if you look at your fourth strategy, which was anger and stress, reducing
Hmm.
it, and you have like under self-awareness, I think there's like 10 different things that they should be aware of. They could actually just take the 10 things and write, like, for example, number one, apprehension about well-being. They can read the description and then write something about it for themselves. So they could
Yeah.
technically use it as a workbook because when you go through there, even on your character defects in different areas with the headings, they could take notes on what they've learned about themselves in those areas, I think.
Yeah.
But that's just me because I
No,
would
no, no,
open it
no.
up. Like if I'm working with a client, I can say, okay, well, let's talk about your reconciliation in step 9 and your direct amends. What have you done? And if you go through like each chapter, you can do it like that.
No, that's a great suggestion, and that's probably how if I was to do a workbook, that's how I would approach it. I would take all the things in here where you know, things that they could practice or things they can think about or write about. That would be part of the workbook,
Because if I,
like
yeah,
just
when I use different resources in my just preps with clients, I'll open up a workbook depending on what issue my client has, and I'll just start asking them questions about a book. If I have a chapter that I think would be helpful and they don't have the book, we can
mhm.
go over the materials and then say, well, how does this apply to you? And so they can still use every book almost as a workbook or as self-help
Sure, yeah. It just without
without the
formalized,
extra.
yeah. But it might help them if it's all ready in place, because that
Yeah,
would
or
make
like
it much.
I do a lot of worksheets for my clients. You could even do an appendix with worksheets
Okay, yeah.
Very
in all
nice.
your free time.
Yeah.
But I think it's great. I mean, I just think the way you explain everything and you go through their rights and everything is really just really helpful because a lot of times we hear not everyone gets good representation in their opinion. So if they have this, they at least have a good understanding and an explanation of all the areas of the hearing and what the expectations are of the commissioners. So I think that's really helpful. I appreciate the book.
I
Oh,
had a
well, thank you so
question
much.
as
Mhm.
well, Joe. It's something that Michelle and I talked about yesterday when we were somewhat preparing for the show.
Right.
Uh, how about all the new stuff that's come up since you wrote the book, the structured decision making framework,
Yeah.
the new terms, the new spin on things? We call it self-awareness now. Some other things are escaping. The impression management that's been coming up a lot, the healthy relationship planning and things like that. What have you thought about in terms of a potential third edition, including those types of things?
Well, that's a great point because things always change over time regarding like new laws. new policies of the Board of Parole Hearings. So that's excellent, especially the structured decision-making framework. And I'm in the initial stages right now of writing a second book, kind of a different format. Although I like it was comfortable for me to write in this format.
Yeah.
And actually, that's one of the things that was the impetus for me to like start writing every day. When I that's when it really took traction, when I got that format down. But to answer your question, sorry, I went off on a tangent. I didn't answer your question
It's
directly,
fine.
which
We do that
inmates
all
have
the
to
time.
answer
It's totally
directly
fine.
in hearing. I tell them all the time, answer the question directly, because they say two words and they go off on a tangent. And I don't want to do that here, so I have to practice what I preach. But regardless, yeah, I'm in the initial stages of. I really don't usually talk about writing, but I'm attempting a second book right now that will hopefully touch on some of the new things that are not in the second edition of the book.
Is that going to be a third edition, or is that going to be a whole different book?
Right now it's going to be an entirely different book.
Wow. I'd be
With
interested in working on that with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I'll need
Not
all
to
the
put
help
you
I
on the
can get.
spot.
Right, right. Well, we can talk off the podcast, whatever. I'll listen to your ideas. But at any rate, yeah, you're right. It should be updated. But at the same time, though, there's a lot of fundamental, like basic stuff in here as well, without the new laws. And as like things like elderly parole, youth offender, structured decision making, yeah. If there's an understanding of that, it helps. And the structured decision making, it's like the conclusion. You got to show them all that stuff first. And I know like what's in the book. If you do it, it'll show offender change. You can't change what you did in the past, so that still might be aggravating. But certainly, it's all about offender change, which is the most important part of structured decision making. So even though, on the flip side, even though structured decision making isn't discussed per se, it's still addressed, like because all of this is about all of offender change.
No, it
That's what
is.
I was
It
going to say.
is.
It's a lot of the stuff leads up to what the new stuff is. And even with elder parole and youth offender, those are just additional considerations. It doesn't change the format of the hearing, and it doesn't change your requirements for suitability. So in that sense, this still sets you up for all of those things. It just doesn't explain it. But then this isn't supposed to take the place of legal counsel either. So the attorney should be explaining structured decision making and the newer stuff to the client anyway. I feel like this book is like a bonus in addition to representation.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because programming, you've
Very good.
discussed that. You've discussed offender change, which is almost everything in there. And you talk about don't get any write-ups and all that other stuff. So
And the credibility and honesty goes to, even though they use new terms in the hearings now, like the new term is impression management and self-awareness. It used to just be honest and get insight. So it's the same stuff. It's just termed differently.
Yes, that's correct. That's a good point.
exactly. So Joe, if you feel like coming back on the podcast to talk about your book further or anything else, we're here every Sunday. You're welcome to join us. I know that you and I had talked about sort of doing this family meeting thing, podcast way back when. I just kind of started it because Sean and Daryl, they said, let's go for it one Sunday. I said, okay. And then we just kept going. And then Michele came on board, and then we'll just make it one big happy family.
Yeah.
Great. Can I also mention something else about the book? I don't know how we are on time.
Oh, we're fine on time.
Okay. Yeah. A couple months ago, I completed the Spanish translation of 36 Strategies.
Wow.
It's out.
I'll need a copy of that.
Yeah, I'll send you a link. You know what? Because I wanted to translate everything, so I translated the title. But when I put in 36 Strategies right now on Amazon, like the Spanish version doesn't come out. So I got to fix that somehow.
Yeah, send me a link because I would love to share that with my clients, because There's very little in the way of Spanish resources.
Correct.
Very little.
And by the way, I gave full credit. There was an inmate who helped me at SATF, Gilbert Acosta, and he did a great job
Awesome.
in doing the Spanish translation. He worked really hard on it, and I got to give him a lot of credit, and he did a great job.
That's wonderful.
So my credit to Gilbert.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, and with your permission, I want to put the book on my website.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
With an affiliate link, no doubt.
I will. I will send both you guys the
I'm just joking.
a link to the.
Yeah, I would appreciate it. I'm updating my workbook and book list for my clients, and so I'd like to have the information for the Spanish one also, so I can put it on there.
Great.
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to do that today with my website editor. I'm going to put that on there, and then that'll be front and center.
Thanks for coming on, Joe. It was really nice talking to you.
Thanks for having me. This was great. I hope we do it again.
Yeah, you're welcome back next Sunday. Every Sunday, this is where we're at. So if you're interested, just text me the night before.
I may do that.
The more the merrier.
Weekly mashup. Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. That sounds great.
Exactly. If you have topics you want to discuss, we're always really, really open about ideas.
Definitely. I'll keep that in mind, because things come up all the time. And if we could discuss it in this format, that'd be excellent.
Yeah, we talk about all kinds of stuff, trying to uncover what is remorse, what is insight, how do you get found suitable, how do you get yourself not suitable, all the way around. It's a podcast for families to listen to really get a sense of what it is they should be hearing their loved ones talking about with them and things like that. Not just, why is he asking me to send him money all the time? Love seeing you both. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And thank you to all the listeners, all the 5 listeners.
And happy Easter to those that celebrate it. Happy Passover to those that celebrate it. And happy Sunday to the rest of you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks.
Thank you for remembering that. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Absolutely.
Bye, everyone. Have a good one.